Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm JJ Flazanes, your host and producer. Thank you for downloading today's episode. Today, we're going to talk about the 7 eating guidelines. Now, regardless of what your relationship is with food, I want you to listen to today's show with a couple different points of view. On whatever addiction you use, whether it be control or technology or workaholism or busyness or social drinking or substance abuse, whatever your addiction is, because we all have them. I want you to listen through identifying yourself in some of these stories and in some of these suggested guidelines for your relationship with food. If you happen to catch today's show on YouTube, jjflazanes.tv, I titled it Women, Food, and God on the actual recording of this episode. But as time went on and I was preparing to publish it, what really stood out were these 7 eating guidelines. And I thought that this was really useful for everybody because we all, whether it be our relationship with food that can be improved, our relationship with our bodies, with our self-care, with asking the right questions to uncover why we have our behaviors and we use the addictions that we use to numb ourselves, it all boils down to the same empowering questions, the same time and energy you take to have a relationship with yourself, and the same time you take to really understand what's driving all of your choices. Geneen Roth is a #1 New York Times bestselling author of Women, Food, and God. Geneen was among the first to link compulsive eating and perpetual dieting with deeply personal and spiritual issues that go far beyond food, weight, and body image. She believes that we eat the way we live and that our relationship to food, money, and love is an exact reflection of our most deeply held beliefs about ourselves and the amount of joy, abundance, pain, scarcity we believe we have or are allowed to have in our lives. Rather than pushing away the crazy things we do, Geneen's work proceeds with the conviction that our actions and beliefs make exquisite sense, and that the way to transform our relationship with food is to be open, curious, and kind with ourselves instead of punishing, impatient, and harsh. In the past 30 years, she has worked with hundreds of thousands of people using meditation, inquiry, and a set of 7 eating guidelines that are the foundation of natural eating. She's appeared on numerous national shows, including Super Soul Sunday, The Oprah Show, 2020, NBC Nightly News, The View, The Today Show, and Good Morning America. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Welcome, everyone, to the show today. Do I have a treat for you? Literally a treat. We are going to combine food and the rest of your life. I have with us today Geneen Roth. For those of you who are watching this on the video, know there is a podcast version you can take with you if you would like to download it. And there will be more of Geneen's bio and some other thoughts at the beginning of the show that we're not having here. And for those of you who are listening to the show and you want to come over and check us out on the video, coming over to jjflazanes.tv. I reached out to Geneen to be on the show because back in 2010 was when I was introduced to her book, Women, Food, and God. And I know it was a huge success. And even just the title of it, hopefully, if you haven't heard of it, will intrigue you. Because whether you're a woman or a man listening to today's show or watching today's show, the information that Geneen's going to share with us and what we're going to discuss applies to everyone. It's just that being a woman, I'm sure that is one of the reasons why she wanted to write Women, Food, and God from an I perspective. But I know that the teachings translate to everyone. Geneen, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Let's talk about your journey a little bit. Let's talk about the breakthrough moment for you that got you to connect food and our spiritual life, or a reflection of our entire beingness in what we chose to eat.
Yes. I would say there were a couple of breakthrough moments for me. The very first one was after I had been dieting and binging for 17 years. During that time, I had either been on a diet or a binge. I never ever considered that eating any other way was possible. And I realized at the nadir, the very bottom of my suffering, because I loathed myself. I wanted to rip myself apart. And yet I felt as if there was no way out because I had been on tons of diets and tons of binges, because for every diet, there's an equal and opposite binge. I realized that food was a way that I was trying to get through to myself, my relationship with food, that I was speaking a language I didn't understand and up to that moment had no desire to understand. I just wanted it to stop. I wanted to have thin thighs and that was that. I started becoming interested in what I was doing. I started becoming curious. I started wanting to find out. I felt like the whole relationship with food was like a language like Braille, and I just didn't know how to read it. So I started asking myself what was going on. And more importantly, or just as importantly, I stopped dieting. I stopped depriving myself, shaming myself, fearing myself. And I told myself I could eat what my body wanted and stop when my body had had enough. And that was also major for me. I just never even considered that was possible.
Were you discovering on a moment by moment basis, because it sounds like you went from food as the addiction of numbing and staying in that sort of circular anxiety, crazy motion, to not knowing how to have a relationship with food, to then going deep within to be completely present in the moment, to have to take into consideration, what does my body want? What is it telling me? What is it saying to me?
I would say it happened gradually and by steps. Then the refusing to diet again happened suddenly, because I realized that no matter how thin I had ever been, and I'd been anorexic for a year and a half during those 17 years, weighing in at 82 pounds and limiting myself to 150 calories a day. But most of that time, I had been way beyond my natural weight. So I'd been 60 pounds more than, and I'm small. I'm 5'1", a little bit more than 5'1". I try to tell people I'm 5'2", but it doesn't really work. So I asked myself, it was a matter of really understanding that no matter how thin I had ever gotten, I still loathed myself. I still looked in the mirror and I saw fat. And that dieting increased the shame that I had about myself. And so I did stop that suddenly. The process or the practice of becoming present happened in stages. It's still happening after all of these years. There are moments, of course, many, many moments and many more moments than there have been where I am really here, really present. And then sometimes my mind just flitters away and I'm not. But it took a while of getting beyond what I thought I wasn't allowed to eat, because that's what I started eating at the beginning. What I thought I wasn't allowed to eat. All of my so-called guilty foods, my forbidden foods, that's what I started on. And I just didn't let myself feel guilty. I know that sounds like a supreme act of will, but it wasn't so much, because the second I let myself out of the cage, so to speak, then I felt much freer inside. I didn't have to binge on those foods because I wasn't dieting on foods that I didn't like.
You don't have to answer this, and it's not a question of age. What is your birthday? Not the date, not just the day and the month, not the year.
But why do you want to know?
Would like to know a little bit about your astrology, because the whole rebellious nature is very, like, it's don't tell me not to do it. Like the whole internal battle of feeling restricted. It's just very indicative of some certain. And again, astrology is like any recipe. There's many different variations of all of it. It's not just based on your sun sign, but I'm always curious about people's sun signs, because that's normally all the things people know. If you know the whole thing, Dr. Christian Northrup and I went down the list. What's this? What's this? What's this? And she could name everything because she does astrology. So it was really fun to just meet each other at where we could understand with a very few words who we were based on that profile. So I was just curious if you know anything about it.
Well, I have a preferred birthday, a birthday that I made up when I was in college, because I didn't like my real birthday because none of my friends were around. That's November 12th. That's my preferred birthday. I do know a lot about astrology myself, because when I was in my 20s, I studied astrology with a friend of mine. I mean, I was a maid, I was a dishwasher, I was a salesperson, I was an avocado and cheese sandwich maker, I was an organic chemistry tutor, a biology tutor. I did the whole thing. And one of the things I did was learn astrology. So I know relatively a lot about astrology and all the different signs. Yeah.
So is that I'm not going to answer what sun sign I'm actually born under? Okay. Okay. But you're choosing to be a Scorpio is what I'm hearing. Okay. By November 12th, I'm going to choose to be a Scorpio, and that is great. So, okay. I'm definitely going to guess later. All right. So
I love that. I love that.
So on the journey of, again, this unfolding for you of the lessons of the teachings, what do you think, or what do you know that you were really searching for?
Well, the main thing I was searching for was to accept myself, was to feel at ease in myself, to feel some kind of contentment or peace, or I would say that would be it, to know that I was worth being here, worth existing, that I didn't have to keep paying for my existence in pounds of suffering, is how I would say it, because I felt as if that I had to keep paying for the fact that I was here. And the more I suffered, the more I felt like I was paying. And somehow that equation, of course, never equaled out, because it's not a true equation. But I just wanted to know I was enough.
Yeah. Beautiful. And that's one of the main messages. And then of course, the next question becomes, for those of you who are listening, because people that listen to my show understand I'm not going to assume all of them do, but they're listening to me for any length of time. They have a consciousness to recognize patterns and emotions and blocks and disconnections and shame and things like that. But of course, the question then becomes, all right, so if I understand that, I know I'm looking for self-love, I'm looking for self-acceptance, I'm looking for self-worth, how do I get there?
Yeah, so it's not a mental understanding. It's not, I tell myself, I am worth being here. I tell myself I am enough. I tell myself I am good. It's not like that. Of course, that's better than telling yourself you are unworthy, you are bad, you are despicable. That's much better thing to say to yourself. It's really a matter of practicing that, of starting from where you are. And there are a couple of different practices that are possible to use, or that I recommend that people use. One of them, which we'll get to, is just simply using what's keeping you from knowing that, which is what you do around food. And so the eating guidelines that really are about eating when you're hungry, eating what your body wants, stopping when you've had enough, and paying attention to what you're doing. I think a main thing that we all do is that we tend to distract ourselves, multitask, don't pay attention, and don't pay attention to what is already working in our lives. So there is so much that is already good and already working. And because of the negativity bias in the brain, as all the neuroscientists have pointed out to us, we focus on what's wrong. We constantly focus on what's missing and what's wrong. And we don't spend time looking around and asking ourselves, what's not wrong right now? What's not wrong right now? 5 things right now. Tell me. And I will often ask this to a group of people. I'll have them share it with each other, what's not wrong right now. And suddenly the energy shifts, because people don't realize how much time they spend going over and over and regrooving the negative patterns, the negative beliefs, and not spending time on the abundance that's already here. You know, I discovered that we lost all of our money in 2008, every cent of it. Well, not every cent of it. I think we had, I can't remember now, but maybe $2,000 left. After 30 years of retirement savings, we lost it all. And I did end up writing a book about that called Lost and Found. One of the most profound realizations that happened to me that has never left me when we lost our money was that I had already been living before we lost our money in the anxiety of not being enough and not having enough. It was much less pronounced than it had ever been, but there was still a way that I was focused on what I didn't have, not what I did have. And what I realized after we lost our money was that the only way I was going to make it through the night, no less the next day and the next night, was by looking at what I could find, not what I had lost. So that was a major thing to happen because I was terrified. I was in a huge amount of shame. I was, scared, really, really scared about what my husband and I were going to do. And when a friend of mine said to me, nothing of any value has been lost, I was furious. I just felt like, well, if ever there was a time when things of value have been lost, now's the time. We just lost everything. But as I really sank into that, I realized that we are what our minds tell us we are, that we see what we believe, not that we believe what we see. So that when I started focusing on the fact that I had enough to eat, I had, for the moment, wasn't quite sure how long that was going to last, a roof over my head. I had sardines and chocolate in the pantry. I still had love in my life. When I started really, really taking that in, I started getting happier and happier and happier and happier, to the point where a week later, I felt like I hadn't been that happy in years. And when my mother said to me, how are you doing, a week after we lost our money? And I said, I'm doing great. She said to me, I have something to ask you, and I won't be offended if you tell me the truth. Are you on drugs? And I said, no. It was really being vigilant about where I allowed my mind to land. And so what's not wrong right now allows us in this moment to feel a ground of goodness, to feel a ground of contentment, and to realize how much we do have. And from there, it's much easier to figure out and make decisions about, how do we want to eat? What do we really want? Do we actually have enough, or do we believe we don't have enough based on what the culture tells us we need to have in order to be happy? What is enough? You know, one thing I also learned was that enough was not a quantity. It was a relationship to what we already had.
Is it too much of a stretch, or was it too much of a stretch to go from what's not wrong right now to what can I appreciate right now?
No, I would say those are the same thing.
It's just an interesting choice of what's not, you know, again, I'm meeting with where you might be starting from, right? If it's all like, I've got so much momentum in the area of what's wrong that in order for me, like, I'll resist going to positive. So in order to get from point A to point B, I got to let go of resistance by just changing the word a little bit to say what's not wrong now.
Exactly. I think that was my decision in asking that question, because so many people, if you ask somebody at any given moment, what's wrong? What's wrong right now? They can tell you. They'll tell you what's wrong in terms of their own feelings. We are constantly feeling like we need to change, improve, get rid of, fix something. So there's something always wrong with ourselves, the people we live with, the environment we live in. And of course, now with the coronavirus, there is a lot of fuel for that, to just keep burning and burning and burning and burning, and for us to alight on everything that is wrong. The problem with that is that it puts us in a state of fear. And from a state of fear, we're not apt to make wise decisions.
Absolutely. Won't hear any arguments from me there. Could do 10 more hours on that one, but I've been staying somewhat quiet. Only because the people who are ready to hear what they need to hear will hear it, and those that aren't won't. So, so I've been very careful to make sure. And again, my community is I just got another message through a service that said, keep empowering us. I love you. Because it's a very polarizing conversation, and I'm on the unpopular side. So, but it's also, but I will say I'm on the unpopular side because I am not that person. In fact, when you were saying what's wrong, what's not wrong right now, my brain couldn't wrap my head around that because I'm so indoctrinated in what's right and what can I appreciate, even when it looks like it's something bad. I'll immediately pivot, even if I'm having an emotional response to it, like, God, this is so uncomfortable, but why did this have to happen for me to grow me or to put me in the right direction or to clarify something? I'll have the feelings. I won't suppress the feelings, but pretty soon after that, I'm looking for what's right at every turn. So that's why I asked about the jumping too, because I, just like exercise, I've literally rewired my brain, although I'm kind of like this normally, but I've rewired the brain to that's how I respond to things. I look for the opportunity. I look for the growth. I look for the bigger picture. And I agree with you that there's a lot of us who aren't doing that at all and aren't good at that. At my last retreat, my last live event, I did a practice with people. It's a law of attraction practice called Rampage of Appreciation. And it was amazing how many people couldn't for 3 minutes find something to appreciate. Like, they're so uncomfortable feeling joy or happiness or hope for 3 minutes. I thought, oh my gosh, guys, this is a gauge as to where we need to expand to allow more goodness in. Because if you're uncomfortable and you can't find something to appreciate about your life, we are tuned to the wrong things.
I think that's so true. I think some of us, I'm not naturally like this. Sort of give me lemonade and I can turn it into lemons in about 30 seconds. So I'm not usually the lemons into lemonade kind of person. I'm the opposite. But I have learned and practiced to open up to what's actually here. Because what I see is that's a filter. That's just simply a filter. That negative filter. It's what I took on as self-protection as a kid. It's what I learned from my parents and my environment. And it just was something that was learned and imbibed. And no before yes was my usual thing. And what I've learned is that the more I resist something, the harder it becomes. And that automatic no, and there's nothing right here, makes everything so much more painful. Yeah.
If I'm not completely right about your sign, it lives somewhere in your chart. I know it. It's either your moon, it's your rising sign, or it's your sun. And I'll ask you later. We will not post it on, we will not put it on the show, but I know it's in you somewhere. It's on some planet. It's on some alignment. So I wanted to, for the people that are listening, one of the things that you've developed are these 7 eating guidelines. And I'd love if we could just take a moment to go through them. And I know you've already mentioned a few of them, but they came out so quickly that I didn't write them down. And I'd love to just make sure everyone is tuned into listening now for the 7 eating guidelines that you've had success with, that you teach with, that you lead workshops and retreats, you write books on. So what are your 7 eating guidelines?
I'm going to preface these by saying that my latest discovery, which I haven't written about in any book whatsoever, is, and as I've written 10 books, that's saying a lot, is the understanding that to really pay close attention to what we actually want, what our bodies actually want, when our bodies have actually had enough, which are part of the eating guidelines, there's got to be an adult present inside of ourselves. And by that, I mean, most diets and binges, in fact, I would venture to say that most of what we read about food and how we're supposed to eat and how we're not supposed to eat is usually the effect of a rebellious kid binging or a compliant child dieting. And it's very hard to tell. When you're being compliant, there's resentment there. I didn't mean that was hard to tell. Everybody knows that. I'm doing this because I'm supposed to, because I'm being told what to eat. And I need to eat this in order to be good. and I need to eat this in order to lose weight. Whereas when you go the opposite side, the binging side, then there's the rebelliousness there. Nobody is going to tell me what to do. Nobody is going to, and then that's still a child in charge. It just happens to be a rebellion. You can't tell me what to do, and don't you try. Now, in order to really be in touch, there's got to be, or hopefully there is, everybody's got this inside themselves already, a wisdom voice, a voice that says to you, sweetheart, what would really feel good in your body? Not what they tell you you should eat, not what you don't want to eat, because what they tell you doesn't actually match with anything inside, but what nourishes you. So I'll ask people to go to the supermarket sometimes. This was pre-COVID days. Some people can still do this now, and go up and down the aisles and stand in front of different categories of food and just check in with their bodies. When I eat pasta, how do I feel? I've certainly eaten pasta many times in my life. How does it affect me? When I eat sugar, how does my body feel? We actually already know. So that first eating guideline, well, the first couple of eating guidelines, eat when you're hungry. Now, the second eating guideline is eat sitting down in a calm environment. This doesn't include the car. The third is eat without distractions. Distractions include these days, and most especially, digital devices. Being on Facebook, being on Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram, you name it. You know, we have so many diversions now that are distractions. So those are the first three eating guidelines. Eat what your body actually wants. Now, this is a hard one for people whose attention and appetites have been hijacked by that compliant or rebellious child. By, no, I don't want to. You can't make me. You can't tell me what to do. Or, yes, I will be good now. So it's really a matter of listening. I was shocked when I listened to find out, oh, wow, my body really doesn't like sugar very much. Now, my mind loves the idea of sugar, loves the idea of sugar. In fact, in another world where I could eat anything I wanted and my body would thrive, because that's really the question we're asking. What foods allow you to thrive and live fully and be nourished and do what you're here to do? Which foods space you out, depress you, zap you, just make you sort of feel like you just want to lay on the floor? So we want those food choices to be dependent on what makes us feel alive, what gives us energy. Now, I would love for that to be sugar, because I love sugar. I love sugar. I just can't even tell you how much I like the taste of sugar. And I think many people do. And I like it in all its forms: ice cream, cookies, chocolate, I mean, everything. But I feel terrible when I eat it. And I can tell at the, in the first 20 minutes, my eyes start getting just a little less focused. I feel a little less energy. And then depending on how much I've eaten, I crash. So I don't eat sugar anymore, except on rare occasions when I'm willing to crash. When I don't have anything else to do, when it's nighttime, a couple times a year maybe, that's when I do it. So that's I think we're up to that fourth guideline.
Yeah, the fourth. Yep.
Yeah. And then the fifth, which is stop when your body has had enough. And so what is enough? I ask people about a scale from 1 to 10. 1 is really hungry. 5 is comfortable. 10 is stuffed. Enough is different for different people. Some people love feeling really full, really stuffed. Some people like not eating on the light side, when they still feel energetic and light. So that's in the 4, 5, 6 phase of that eating scale. Enough. And enough can happen in mid-bite. So if you're not paying attention, but you're on the internet when you're eating or watching television when you're eating, you're going to miss it completely. And when you miss what you're eating, what happens is that you want more, even if you're full. Because satisfaction is a result of emotional and physical factors. And the emotional has to do with attention and awareness. The physical only has to do with what you've actually put in your body. So stop when you've had enough. The next eating guideline is eating with joy. People look at me very perplexed. Enjoyment, gusto, and pleasure. They don't know what that means. It's been so long because people who label themselves as emotional eaters or compulsive eaters or having challenges with food don't feel like they're allowed to actually enjoy their food. So they don't make noises. They don't say yum. I have a friend who eats a lot with her 11-year-old niece, and her niece, whenever she eats, she raises her shoulders and she says, yum, yum. And so that's how we should all feel when we eat. Yum, yay, we're eating, this is good. It's really a bummer when we don't like what we're eating and when we're not enjoying it. And so it's important to really enjoy what you eat and to eat foods you enjoy. And then the last guideline is eat with the intention of being in full view of other people. And what that means is not hiding and sneaking. Because the main thing I have learned about food is what you do with food, you do in the rest of your life. So how you eat is how you live. How you live is how you eat. Because it's you doing the same thing, living and eating. I mean, it's not like like an alien, an ET comes into your body and suddenly takes over your relationship with food and then leaves, and then you go live the rest of your life. No, your beliefs and thoughts and feelings are expressed in every single thing you do. So if I believe that in order to be loved, I have to hide and sneak and not tell the truth, then that will come through my relationship with food. I'll eat cottage cheese and fruit in front of people, and when I'm by myself, I'll go for that entire stack of cookies and ice cream. Because my belief is if they saw me, they wouldn't love me. And so we want to break through that and just simply tell the truth there.
Beautiful. Those are great. And I know that's going to hit home for a lot of people. And so is the obedient child and the rebellious child. I also know that there are people who are also being obedient. I also will credit astrology for some of them. I'm thinking of a particular Virgo who Virgos like to do things the right way. And it is the obedient child. But there's also a fear if I don't do it the right way, not only will I maybe not be accepted, but I'll lose control. Because in order for me to keep control, I have to white knuckle this thing I'm doing, because I don't trust that if I actually allow myself to feel and be in the moment and be honest moment to moment, that I could get easily derailed and go down a deep, dark hole I don't know how to get out of.
Yes, right, exactly. I divide, and this is a very broad-based category, those of us with challenges with food into what I call permitters and restrictors. And restrictors are the ones who do very well on diets. And they feel that structure and control lets them feel safe. And so the intense structure and the feeling of control that structure gives really allows restrictors to feel safe. The hardest guideline for a restrictor is eat what your body wants. They know that what they should and shouldn't eat, but not what they really, really want, because that's scary territory. Whereas a permitter feels most comfortable without rules, without structure, and rather than feeling in control of it, controlling themselves, in order to feel in control of their environment, there's some kind of sense that it's all out of control anyway. What difference does it make if I also just space out and eat a lot and am numb to the lack of sanity, so to speak, in the environment? So there's a desire to just space out and merge with the environment, not structure and be in control of oneself in order to control the environment.
Yeah.
And they don't do well on diets at all. They don't do well. And the hardest guideline for them to follow is stop when you've had enough. Because saying no for a permitter is just an anathema. I have a really good friend who's a permitter, and she just when I say to her, "Are you hungry?" She'll say to me, "What does that have to do with it?" And I'll say, "Have you had enough? What does that have to do with it? This tastes delicious." And so there's no sense of hunger, fullness. I mean, she knows when she's really had too much, but there's no desire to stay within a kind of prescribed way of doing it. They're rule breakers.
Freedom seekers.
Right.
Freedom seekers, because I'm one of those, but I have structure. So I think I probably fall somewhere in the middle, because I'm not afraid of not having structure, and I am present in my body, but at the same time, I don't eat everything that I think for me, when you learn more about what it does to your body and you actually care about your body, you don't want to eat the things that biochemically aren't good for you and actually are bad for you. Right. So there are things that maybe in my childhood I ate because I didn't know any better, and maybe they tasted good. But now I look at something with red dye number 3 and I'm like, don't give me that. I'm not eating that. Yeah. Or I look at, some kind of food made of all these chemicals. I'm like, I'm not putting that in my body. I can't even cook for people. I have to cook for people in the way I eat, because I can't in good consciousness serve you something that you may be fine eating, that's not organic, that's full of genetic modification, that's full of gluten and sugar and processed stuff. And I won't do it. I can't. I have too much integrity to harm your body, even if you don't care, because I care.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Lovely. Yes.
Now, the work that you've been doing over the years with all the retreats, because I know that you were doing retreats back when this book came out in 2010, and I know you're still doing some. In fact, you have one coming up at the end of this year of 2020 called This Extraordinary Moment, and it's an online retreat. What kinds of things will you be doing with people there?
Yeah, so our retreat days are start with quiet time. We all gather, and we did a retreat like this in May online on Zoom, and it was wonderful, really wonderful. I had my doubts about whether there could be intimacy developing and whether people would really feel connected to the group and to themselves. And people actually adored it because they were eating in their own homes rather than at a retreat center with the food that was being served, and they were sleeping in their own beds. And so they really liked that. So the day starts out with meditation or contemplation. And even if people haven't meditated before, it's totally fine. We do it so that there's enough spaciousness and permission. And we mix those with some kind of movement, some kind of body movement to really allow people to land in their bodies. Then we eat together. So that's one of the highlights, and that's a highlight at an in-person retreat and also at a Zoom retreat where people get their breakfast or lunch. In this case, it would be breakfast, and we all gather back together again, and we eat together. And I do a guided process with that. And that's about looking at the food that you've prepared and or taken and really asking yourself, okay, well, who actually took this food? Was it the kid in me that wanted everything in sight? Was I in touch with what I needed or wanted? How do I feel like, how do I think I'm going to feel when this is done, when this food is done? So it's an active inquiry. So those are the two kinds of processes and practices we do at the retreat. They have to do with hands-on use of food, questioning how we use it to our thoughts, feelings, and beliefs without food. And of course, those things are related because, as I said, it's you doing all of that. So there's that. Then I usually give some kind of talk about what we've just experienced. And there's a lot of interaction, a lot of dyads, triads, a lot of people with each other. A lot of, and on Zoom, it's breakout rooms, and those are wonderful too. And so that's how the day goes. In the afternoon, we meet again. I mean, there's a break for people to rest and walk and go outside. And then we meet again and look at what's come up. What's it like to be ourselves in this moment? What are the thoughts, feelings, and beliefs that are coming up? What's keeping me from being present? And so we look at that. And throughout the afternoon and the evening, we do something that's non-conceptual, non-didactic, where people can really relax at that point. Often that has to do, again, with some kind of easy body movement. Easy by that, I say you can do it sitting in a chair.
Okay, perfect. So in order to check out and register for this extraordinary moment, online retreats, December 1st through the 6th, you can go to retreats.geneenroth.com. For those of you that are watching this on the video, you see it here on the video. And for those of you listening on the podcast, it will be in the show notes. So the link for the retreat plus just Geneen's normal link, which is geneenroth.com. This will take you directly to the page with the most recent and upcoming retreat, retreats.geneenroth.com. And again, that is this extraordinary moment, and it's happening in December. So make sure to check out retreats.geneenroth.com. And before we close the show, Geneen, for people that are on different ends of the spectrum, I've got a pretty conscious group of people who want change. They believe in themselves. They know that they feel an energy and an empowerment from the guests on the show, from the topics on the show, from me, and they believe in themselves, even if they don't have all the right tools. What would you say to those who still struggle with weight? They do believe in themselves. They've invested in themselves in some way, and they're on this path. And obviously coming to your retreat would be great, but just a place of wisdom of what to think about, what to consider, what to notice in order to get them from maybe a stuck place that they're in to get to that next level.
I think the first thing, and always the most important thing, is acceptance. Is if I am still struggling with anything, for instance, let's say, let's just say it's food and I've overeaten and I keep overeating. Then the first thing that I would want to do is make room for that, not resist that, because as we were talking about before, when you resist anything and start a war up with anything, any pattern, any person, any belief, any thought, any feeling, then you get stucker, and it gets, as they say in Alice in Wonderland, worser and worser. So I think the first thing to do is show that in you that eats some compassion or forgiveness, as if it was a child who really needed your attention and needed you to know something that you might not be listening to. So if I was struggling with food, if I had just overeaten for days or just for one day, what I would want to do is say to that part of myself, sweetheart, what's going on? I'm wondering what's happening. Are you really hungry? Are you anxious? Are you scared? Is there something that I am not including in my life that you really need from me right now? As if this was a part of you you could make room for. Any feeling, and make no mistake about it, eating compulsively is based on a thought, which turns into a feeling, which turns into an action. So any feeling or thought or behavior wants is to be understood, to be made room for us to move over. It wants to belong in the pantheon of everything we're happy to include. We're less happy to include this. And the way I see it is that if it's trying to get your attention, if you are stuck, so to speak, then it means that there's something you're not paying attention to. And so that pattern needs your attention. You can ask that pattern. You can just move over and say, what do you want to tell me? Now, you can do that in a dialogue. That's how I started out. When one of my big breakthroughs when I first started doing this was doing a dialogue. It's in my first book, Feeding the Hungry Heart, between me and what I called fat. And I was asking fat what it wanted me to know, because at that point I was 60 pounds beyond where I am now. And I wanted to know what was going on. And believe me, fat had a lot to say to me that was shocking to me. I could not believe what I hadn't been paying attention to. I was amazed. And seeing that and naming that and accepting that was a huge step to changing that.
I love that. It puts it into real, instead of like you in a relationship with whatever, call it fat or call it like you're having, we can all identify with relationships. Ideas,
Yes.
beliefs sometimes become too abstract, but when you can make it into a person or make it into an energy or make it into
Yes.
something that you have to look at and talk to and then listen to, but it's
Right.
outside of you or separate from you, then we can actually be an observer instead of that twirly spinniness that goes on inside of our head with that, we're having the devil and the angel on both shoulders, and we can't discern which one is which and who am I in this and what is this thing that I'm dealing with. So I think that's excellent advice. And I would recommend everybody, of course, check out all of Geneen's stuff. Go to geneenroth.com. Look her up on Amazon. She's got 1 million books, 10, and her retreat, of course. So if you're someone who is struggling at all with your relationship with food or with weight loss, and you know that there's a next level for you that is a smarter step, or you just resonate with all of this, I encourage you to check it out. I'll put it back up on the screen, geneenroth.com. Geneen, thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, such a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me and having me. Thank you so much.